There is a country where a train travels 200 kilometers per hour through the Gotthard Base Tunnel, 57 kilometers of solid rock carved beneath the Swiss Alps, the longest railway tunnel on Earth. Above the tracks sits 2 full kilometers of mountain. Ancient granite peaks dusted with eternal snow, their summits piercing clouds that drift across Alpine skies like white silk scarves. This journey should be impossible. These mountains should be barriers, but Switzerland turned obstacles into pathways. This is a place where 4 different worlds seem stitched together by invisible golden threads, where morning begins with the aroma of Italian espresso rising from lakeside cafes in Ticino, where palm trees sway beside turquoise waters that reflect Mediterranean light, where lunch brings French wine from vineyards that cascade down sunny slopes above Lake Geneva, their neat rows of vines producing grapes that have made Swiss wine a hidden treasure for centuries, where afternoon delivers the sound of German church bells echoing across emerald valleys dotted with wooden chalets so perfectly preserved they look like illustrations from fairy tales, where evening settles over remote mountain villages, where Romansh, a language older than the Roman Empire, still whispers through stone streets that time forgot. This is Switzerland, a country that makes absolutely no logical sense. Alpine peaks rise like cathedral spires from valleys so deep and green they seem painted by artists who believed in magic. 4 official languages divide regions that somehow share the same flag, the same currency, the same quiet pride. Protestant villages and Catholic towns sit separated by glacial rivers that run electric blue from ice melt, divided by 1,000-year-old religious feuds that never quite disappeared but somehow learned to coexist. The Swiss Alps create natural barriers so imposing, so utterly impassable, that Napoleon's armies turned back rather than attempt crossing, that Roman legions built roads around rather than through, that medieval traders chose dangerous sea routes over Alpine mountain passes. Yet these ancient valleys, hidden behind mountain walls so tall they block out the morning sun until nearly noon, somehow connect through bright yellow trains that arrive with such precision you could set your watch by their doors opening. Trains painted the color of Alpine wildflowers, their windows reflecting passing lakes and forests and villages, their interiors filled with the quiet murmur of 4 languages blending into one Swiss symphony. In a few hours, someone will attempt something that sounds completely absurd. Visiting all 26 Swiss cantons in just 24 hours using only public transportation. No private cars racing down mountain highways. No helicopter shortcuts over impossible terrain. No cheating the challenge by bending the rules. Just trains, buses, gondolas, and the most perfectly synchronized transportation system ever engineered by human ambition. 93% of Swiss trains arrive on time, the best performance in all of Europe, perhaps the entire world. 77% of all journeys require less than 10 minutes to transfer between connections. These are not lucky accidents or temporary achievements. This is Switzerland, working exactly as designed. A living machine of precision. A country that runs like the watches it exports to every corner of Earth. Switzerland didn't remove its obstacles. Granite mountains still tower. Cultural differences still exist. Religious divisions still mark invisible borders. Instead, Switzerland engineered solutions powerful enough to overcome what should have been permanent barriers. By the end of this journey through 26 cantons, through tunnels that pierce mountains and trains that connect impossibilities, you'll discover not just whether the 24-hour challenge succeeds, but the hidden engineering philosophy and the stunning Swiss landscapes that could change how every country thinks about connection, unity, and what becomes truly possible when vision meets determination. This is Switzerland, a country that looks like four completely different nations stitched together by invisible threads of shared history and extraordinary engineering. From above, if you could float like an eagle riding thermal currents above the Alps, the Swiss landscape spreads below like a living quilt, where each colorful piece belongs to an utterly different world. Mountain ridges cut through the country like giant stone walls built by ancient gods, creating separate valleys that feel like separate universes, places that should have become independent countries centuries ago. Travel south into Switzerland's Ticino region, and palm trees line lake shores where people speak musical Italian and build their houses with red tile roofs that glow like embers in the golden afternoon light. Ticino stretches warm and inviting like a Mediterranean dream accidentally placed among Alpine peaks. The region glows with colors borrowed from Italy: ochre walls, terracotta roofs, cobblestone streets worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Stone villages climb steep hillsides above Lake Lugano, where waters so blue and clear they mirror the sky perfectly, where 63,000 people live like they inhabit northern Italy rather than Alpine Europe. Outdoor cafes fill with animated Italian conversations while church bells ring across valleys that feel more like Tuscany than Switzerland. Gelato shops serve Italian ice cream. Markets sell fresh pasta and aged parmesan. Fishing boats bob in harbors where mountains rise directly from water's edge, their peaks still white with snow, even as lakeside gardens bloom with subtropical flowers. Move west across Switzerland's changing landscape, and the French-speaking regions appear like scenes from Impressionist paintings. Rolling green hills, dotted with white farmhouses, their shutters painted cheerful colors, their gardens exploding with flowers. Lake Geneva stretches like an enormous blue mirror between mountains, its surface sometimes so calm and perfect it reflects clouds and peaks with photographic clarity. French culture has thrived here for 8 centuries, creating a distinctly Swiss version of French elegance. Vineyards cover sunny slopes in perfect geometric rows, their vines twisted with age and wisdom, producing wines that Swiss people guard as precious secrets. Medieval towns with Gothic church spires rise from valleys where people have spoken French longer than the United States has existed. Lausanne climbs hillsides in tiers like an amphitheater facing the lake, its old town a maze of narrow streets where stone fountains have flowed since the Middle Ages. Geneva spreads along the lake shore, where the jet d'eau, a fountain shooting water 140 meters into the air, creates rainbows in the mist, where international organizations make decisions that affect the entire world. Sweep north and east across Switzerland to discover the German-speaking heartland, neat villages with wooden chalets arranged in such perfect order they look planned by architects obsessed with symmetry and beauty. Green pastures stretch between dark pine forests, where morning fog settles like cotton, where church bells ring across valleys on Sunday mornings with sounds that have marked time for 1,000 years. Traditional chalets feature carved wooden balconies overflowing with red geraniums, their flower boxes so precisely maintained they could be museum displays. The Swiss Alps rise here like white-capped giants protecting valleys where German traditions have stayed strong through centuries of European chaos. Zurich sparkles on its lake, a city where medieval Old Town meets modern banking, where cobblestone streets suddenly open onto glass towers, where swans glide past outdoor cafes serving Swiss chocolate and freshly baked bread. Bern preserves its medieval character so perfectly that the entire old town became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Sandstone arcades, creating covered walkways where people have shopped for 800 years, fountains depicting colorful legends still flowing in public squares. Hidden in Switzerland's highest mountain valleys, clinging to slopes so steep and remote they seem designed to hide secrets, ancient villages preserve Romansch, a melodic language older than Latin, a tongue that evolved from what Roman soldiers spoke 2,000 years ago. Only 35,000 people still speak this endangered language, keeping it alive through determination and pride. These remote Swiss communities sit in valleys so high and isolated that winter snow buries them for months, where the old language survived while the modern world grew and changed around them. Stone houses with tiny windows and thick walls cling to mountain slopes, where families have lived the same way for centuries, where traditions pass from grandparents to grandchildren like treasured heirlooms, where the rhythm of seasons still governs daily life. But Switzerland's Alps do far more than create stunning scenery for postcards and Instagram photos. These mountains build walls of solid rock and ancient ice that rise 4 full kilometers into the sky, barriers so massive and imposing that for most of human history they kept Swiss people so completely separated that neighboring regions felt more connected to France, Germany, or Italy than to each other's Swiss cantons. The Alps are not gentle hills, but true mountains, savage peaks where avalanches roar, where glaciers crack and groan, where storms blow with violence that has killed climbers and trapped travelers. Cross Switzerland's Central Alps yourself and experience this profound division firsthand. Start in Ticino's warm valleys, where lazy Italian conversations float from outdoor cafes and medieval bell towers rise above Mediterranean plants that shouldn't survive this far north, but somehow thrive. The pace of life feels slow and warm, like honey in sunshine. People gesture expressively with their hands while talking, their body language borrowed from Italy. Restaurant menus feature pasta and risotto, polenta and ossobuco. The architecture echoes northern Italy. Stone buildings with external staircases, covered loggias, terracotta roof tiles. Even the air smells different, warmer, touched with Mediterranean herbs and lake water. Then board the train that enters Switzerland's Gotthard-based tunnel, a 57-kilometer tube carved through solid granite by workers who spent 17 years drilling, blasting, and digging through one of Earth's hardest mountains. The tunnel cost 12 billion Swiss francs and required removing enough rock to fill several Egyptian pyramids. For 17 minutes, travel through complete darkness under 2 full kilometers of Swiss mountain. More rock than most people see in their entire lives, rock compressed and hardened over millions of years into something nearly indestructible. Above the tunnel sits the mass of several mountains, their peaks eternally white with glaciers that have existed since the last ice age. The train races through this underground world at 200 kilometers per hour, a speed that feels impossible when you remember you're traveling through solid mountain. Emerge on the northern side into Canton Uri, and everything about Switzerland has completely transformed. The Italian warmth and Mediterranean ease disappear instantly. German efficiency and Alpine order take command. Wooden chalets replace stone villas. Neat gardens replace wild Mediterranean plants. German voices replace musical Italian. Even the Swiss mountain air smells different, crisper, cleaner, touched with pine forests and glacier ice. Church steeples rise in different architectural styles. Farm animals are different breeds. Even the cheese changes from Italian varieties to Swiss Emmental. You have traveled through one Swiss tunnel for just 17 minutes and emerged in what feels like a completely different country, a different culture, almost a different world. Switzerland's geographical barriers were so extreme, so absolutely imposing, that cultural differences grew bigger instead of smaller over time. Mountain passes that connected Swiss regions were deadly dangerous. Every winter, snow and ice blocked roads for months, sometimes until late spring. Avalanches buried entire villages without warning. Many Swiss people lived their whole lives without ever seeing other parts of their own country, dying in the same valleys where they were born without crossing a single major mountain pass. Protestant Swiss areas and Catholic Swiss regions developed completely separately behind mountain walls, their religious differences hardening into mutual suspicion. French-speaking Swiss people traded with Paris and French cities because reaching German-speaking Swiss areas required dangerous mountain journeys that took days and risked life. Italian-speaking Swiss connected their economy with Milan because crossing the Alps to northern Switzerland was nearly impossible except during brief summer months. Switzerland's 26 regions functioned like 26 separate small countries with their own laws, their own schools teaching different languages, their own traditions that had almost nothing in common with neighboring cantons. The mountains that should have kept Switzerland divided forever, that should have made Swiss unity completely impossible, became instead the motivation for engineering and building that would bring the impossible country together. The obstacles that created Switzerland's deep divisions would become the reason for engineering solutions that no other country had ever dared attempt. Switzerland chose engineering over surrender. They chose connection over accepting permanent division. They chose to build through problems, instead of accepting them as unchangeable barriers. This choice would transform not just Switzerland, but the very idea of what determined a country's destiny. Picture Switzerland in the 1870s, a newly formed country, barely 20 years old, still figuring out how to hold itself together without falling apart into linguistic and religious pieces, watching the rest of Europe race ahead into the industrial future, while Swiss mountains kept them trapped in an increasingly irrelevant past. Across the flat plains of Europe, black railroad lines spread like enormous spider webs connecting major cities from London to Berlin to Paris to Vienna. Steam locomotives, the miracle technology of the age, carried goods and people faster than ever before in human history, transforming trade, shrinking distances, making neighboring countries feel closer, while Switzerland remained isolated behind its Alpine walls. But those railroad lines stopped abruptly at Switzerland's borders, like rivers hitting walls. Private railroad companies had built maybe 40 kilometers of track inside Switzerland, looked up at the towering Alps with their impossible heights and endless granite, then decided it was completely impossible to continue. The mountains were simply too tall, the valleys too deep, the rock too hard, the cost too astronomical, the profit too uncertain. It made perfect business sense to build around Switzerland, not through it. Why waste money and workers' lives trying to tunnel through mountains when easier routes existed? Look across Europe's railroad map from the 1870s and see clearly how Switzerland became an island of isolation, completely surrounded by connected neighbors racing into modernity. Trains could speed from Paris to Vienna, but they had to travel hundreds of extra kilometers to avoid Swiss mountains. Trade routes that could have passed through Switzerland in mere hours instead took days to wind around the Alpine barriers. European commerce flowed around Switzerland like water around a stone. The country risked becoming permanently irrelevant. A picturesque mountain museum, visited by wealthy tourists, but excluded from the real business of European trade and power. Swiss leaders faced a choice that would determine their country's future for generations: accept permanent isolation and watch European trade and influence flow around them forever, slowly becoming poorer and less important as other nations prospered. Or gamble everything on something that had never been successfully attempted at this scale: digging straight through the biggest, hardest mountains in Europe using 1870s technology that seemed primitive compared to the challenge. The Swiss government made a decision that seems impossible to understand today, a choice so bold it bordered on insanity. This small, relatively poor country, Switzerland had far less money than the great European kingdoms and empires, decided to subsidize private companies to attempt perhaps the most dangerous engineering project on Earth at that time. They would dig a railway tunnel through 15 kilometers of solid granite deep inside the Gotthard Mountain, deeper than any tunnel ever built, through rocks so hard it broke drill bits, using only the limited technology available in 1870s. Hand tools, black powder explosives, human muscle, and desperate determination. Visit the Gotthard region today and try to imagine the overwhelming engineering challenge that faced Swiss workers in 1873 when work actually began. The Alpine granite here is some of the hardest rock on Earth, compressed over millions of years by unimaginable geological forces into stone that resists drilling and blasting. Mountain peaks rise 3 full kilometers above the planned tunnel route. Swiss engineers had to somehow dig through this rock using only the primitive equipment available. No modern tunnel boring machines, no computer calculations to predict structural stress, no sophisticated ventilation systems, no safety equipment to protect workers from rock dust that would destroy their lungs and kill them slowly over years of suffering. The Swiss tunnel project began with workers using simple hand drills and black powder explosives that barely scratched the granite. Every single day, men climbed down into dark shafts where temperatures reached 45 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook food, hot enough that workers collapsed from heat stroke. Rock dust filled the underground air so thick that workers could barely breathe, their lungs filling with granite particles that caused diseases doctors couldn't cure. Ventilation was primitive at best, simple shafts and pipes that barely moved the deadly air. Safety measures were almost non-existent by modern standards. Workers died regularly from explosions, cave-ins, falling rocks, heat stroke, and lung disease. Travel through Switzerland's mountain valleys today and see small villages where families sent their fathers and sons to work on the tunnel project, knowing many would never return. About 200 workers died during the 9 brutal years of construction. 200 families destroyed, 200 futures ended so Switzerland could connect. Most died from lung disease caused by breathing rock dust every single day for months or years. Others died instantly in explosions when unstable rock collapsed without warning. Their bodies sometimes never recovered from the rubble. Swiss families in mountain communities paid the terrible human cost of their country's engineering ambition. But the Swiss government and Swiss engineers were driven by something far bigger than immediate profit or political popularity. They possessed a vision, a dream that seemed impossible but felt necessary. that Switzerland could transform from a geographic problem into a geographic solution. If they could create a reliable passage through the Alps, if they could connect Italy to Germany through Swiss territory, they could become Europe's neutral trade hub. The country that connected rather than divided, that brought together rather than separated. The Gotthard Tunnel project required an almost unimaginable 441 million man-hours of human labor. Swiss workers removed rock literally by hand, one bucket at a time, one wheelbarrow load after another, day after day, for 9 years. They built the tunnel using engineering techniques that had never been tested at this scale and depth, inventing solutions as problems appeared. British engineer John Brunel and Swiss engineer Alfred Escher provided technical leadership and vision. But the actual brutal digging was done by ordinary Swiss mountain people who learned tunnel engineering as they worked, who became experts through painful experience. Walk into Zurich's magnificent Hauptbahnhof just before 10 o'clock on any morning and feel the electric energy building on the platforms like static before a lightning storm. The station itself is an architectural masterpiece, a soaring glass and steel cathedral of transportation where natural light pours down through the arched ceiling onto marble platforms, polished by millions of footsteps. Swiss commuters check their watches with calm confidence, born from a lifetime of reliable trains. Business people in crisp suits adjust their leather briefcases. Families gather their children close, pointing at departure boards. Everyone knows exactly what is about to happen because it happens every 30 minutes, every single day, with the precision of atomic clocks. At precisely 9:53, the first bright yellow train glides into the station from mountain villages scattered across Alpine valleys, its brakes releasing a soft pneumatic hiss. The doors open with Swiss precision. Mountain farmers step onto the platform carrying wheels of fresh cheese wrapped in cloth, morning newspapers tucked under their arms, the smell of Alpine pastures still clinging to their work clothes. At 9:54, another train arrives from lake towns, where fishermen caught fresh fish at sunrise, their nets pulled from waters so clear you can see stones on the bottom. The fish are already packed in ice, already sold to Zurich restaurants, already part of Switzerland's seamless connection between mountain, lake, and city. At 9:55, a sleek intercity train arrives from French-speaking cities filled with business travelers reading Le Temps and university students carrying books in 3 languages. Stand on platform 7 at exactly 9:56 and watch the final train of this pulse arrive from Italian valleys where palm trees grow beside Alpine lakes, where Swiss people speak Italian and build stone houses with Mediterranean architecture. Italian voices mix with German conversations and French laughter, creating the linguistic symphony that is Switzerland. 4 different languages flow together like musical notes, creating harmony from diversity. Then, the magic happens with clockwork precision. At exactly 10 o'clock, every scheduled train has arrived. Not 9:58, not 10:02, exactly 10 o'clock. Thousands of people move across the marble platforms in what looks like chaos, but is actually a carefully choreographed dance of Swiss efficiency. Red digital clocks above every platform show exactly the same time, synchronized to atomic perfection. Business people walk with quick, purposeful steps toward their connections. Elderly couples move with careful grace, knowing their connecting train will wait if needed. Young travelers with colorful backpacks check train schedules on their phones, planning adventures that Switzerland's perfect system makes effortless. The main concourse feels like a living organism. Coffee shops fill with morning customers, grabbing Swiss pastries and strong espresso. The smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee fills the air. Flower vendors sell bright bouquets to people meeting loved ones off arriving trains. Newspaper stands display papers in 4 languages. Swiss efficiency creates what should be chaos, but instead feels like peaceful, purposeful movement. Thousands of people flowing in different directions, without collision, without confusion, without stress. At 10:02, the departure symphony begins, like musicians responding to an invisible conductor. A bright red double-decker train pulls out of the station, heading to Bern through green countryside, dotted with wooden farmhouses and white church steeples. At 10:03 comes the train to Basel, near the French border, where 3 countries meet at one river junction, where Switzerland ends and Europe begins. At 10:05, the most amazing train of all enters the mountain tunnels, a sleek silver engine that will travel through solid rock for 17 minutes and emerge in Italian valleys where everything changes. Watch from the platform as train after train disappears into Swiss landscapes like arrows shot toward distant targets. Some head to peaceful lakes surrounded by snow-covered peaks where sailboats drift on mirror-still water. Others climb mountain railways to ski resorts where cable cars wait to carry passengers even higher, to places where eagles soar and glaciers glow blue. Long-distance trains race toward Paris, Milan, and Vienna, carrying Swiss precision to European capitals, proving that small Switzerland connects the continent. By 10:08, the station becomes quiet again. Platforms empty, except for cleaning crews sweeping away the evidence of thousands of passengers. Digital clocks tick steadily toward 10:30, when the entire miraculous process will happen again. This amazing rhythm repeats every 30 minutes, all day, every day, forever. A heartbeat that never stops, never slows, never fails. But Zurich is just one heartbeat in Switzerland's vast transportation body. Travel through remote Alpine valleys, places so isolated they seem forgotten by time, and discover how this timing system reaches every corner of the country with the same precision. In tiny mountain villages, where maybe 50 people live in wooden houses built centuries ago, their balconies carved with folk art, yellow postal buses arrive at exactly the right moment to connect with national trains in valley towns, not approximately on time. Exactly on time. Ride a mountain railway up to Zermatt below the famous Matterhorn, that iconic pyramid peak that appears on Toblerone chocolate, and see how even trains that climb impossible slopes using gear teeth to grip the rails follow the Swiss timing system perfectly. Cable cars that carry skiers to glacial peaks at 3,000 meters coordinate their schedules with trains from distant cities. A family from Geneva can plan a weekend in the Alps, knowing with absolute certainty that trains, buses, and mountain lifts will connect perfectly, that they can catch a 6 a.m. train and be skiing by 9 a.m., that the system will not fail them. Switzerland has synchronized every vehicle in the entire country into one unified organism. 8,000 trains carry millions of people every day, with 93% arriving exactly on time. A performance no other country matches. Yellow postal buses serve mountain villages so remote they have no paved roads, just gravel tracks that turn to mud in spring. Lake steamers, beautiful white boats that have sailed Swiss waters for over a century, carry passengers across crystal blue waters while connecting perfectly to train schedules on opposite shores. Even the cable cars swinging above Alpine valleys run on schedules coordinated with the national system. Drive through Switzerland's countryside on a perfect spring morning and see small train stations in valleys where church bells ring across green pastures dotted with brown cows wearing ceremonial bells. Even here, in places that feel untouched by modernity, trains arrive every 30 minutes like clockwork. Swiss farmers take morning trains to city markets selling fresh vegetables and homemade bread. City families take evening trains to country restaurants for traditional dinners of fondue and Alpine views. The system serves everyone equally because Switzerland believes connection is a right, not a privilege. But this perfect system faces its ultimate test when someone tries to visit all 26 Swiss cantons in just 24 hours. Will Switzerland's clockwork country keep perfect time under extreme pressure? Can the Swiss transportation system handle the impossible challenge of connecting every corner of the country in one ambitious day? When perfection meets impossible demands, which one wins? The answer will reveal whether Switzerland has truly engineered the impossible. Deep in Switzerland's mountain valleys, where ancient villages cling to steep hillsides like birds' nests attached to cliffs, where snow blocks roads for half the year and modern life feels centuries away, something extraordinary happens every morning that reveals Switzerland's deepest values. A bright yellow postal bus winds up narrow mountain roads, barely wide enough for one vehicle, navigating hairpin turns that overlook valleys thousands of meters below to reach villages where maybe only 200 people live. This bus comes twice every day, every single day of the year, without exception, connecting remote communities to the rest of Switzerland. In winter storms that would stop most transportation, Swiss drivers navigate these dangerous roads with chains on tires, delivering mail and carrying passengers who depend absolutely on this lifeline. Most countries would declare this bus route loses too much money to justify operation. Most private transportation companies would cancel the service immediately to cut losses. But Switzerland operates by a completely different rule that defines the country's character. Mobility is a fundamental right, not a market privilege. Every person, no matter where they choose to live, should be able to travel when they need to. Remote mountain villages deserve the same quality transportation as big cities. This is not a business decision based on profit and loss. This is a national promise written into law and culture. Travel through Switzerland's countryside during autumn when forests turn gold and red, when farmers harvest crops before winter arrives, and see this philosophy in action everywhere. Visit tiny villages nestled in Alpine valleys where church bells ring across green pastures and wooden houses have stood for centuries, their timbers darkened by age, their foundations built on stones placed by ancestors long dead. Even here, where roads are so narrow that two cars cannot pass without one pulling into a turnout, public buses arrive on perfect schedules. Swiss law requires it. Swiss culture demands it. Swiss values make it unthinkable to abandon any community. By Swiss federal law, every village with year-round residents must have access to public transportation. It can be a train, a bus, a gondola, or some combination that connects to the larger network. But no Swiss community should be left unreachable, cut off, isolated. This is not negotiable. This is not subject to cost-benefit analysis. This is a national promise that Switzerland keeps no matter what it costs. The law treats transportation like clean water or electricity, a basic service that civilized society must provide to all citizens equally. Ride the cable cars that serve mountain communities so remote they have no roads at all. Villages accessible only by aerial gondola or on foot. Some cable cars carry only 50 people per day, swinging above vertical cliffs to reach villages where families have lived for generations, where the same names appear on gravestones spanning centuries. Maintaining these cable cars costs more money than they could ever collect in tickets. The economics make no business sense whatsoever. But Switzerland keeps them running because connection is considered a basic human need, because abandoning these communities would betray fundamental Swiss values. Watch Swiss engineers work on mountain railways that climb impossible slopes to reach ski resorts and alpine towns perched on mountainsides. These trains use special gear teeth that grab rails cut with matching notches, allowing engines to pull themselves up grades so steep that regular trains would slide backwards. Building these railways through solid rock and maintaining them through brutal alpine winters costs enormous amounts of money. Blizzards bury the tracks. Avalanches threaten to destroy infrastructure. Rocks fall from cliffs above. But Swiss people believe the cost is worth paying because these railways connect communities, preserve mountain culture, make traditional ways of life sustainable in the modern world. Visit Switzerland in winter when snow falls heavy and deep, when avalanches roar down mountainsides, when temperatures drop far below zero, and see snowplows working all night to keep mountain roads open for morning buses. Swiss transportation workers clear avalanches using explosives to trigger controlled slides. They remove ice with specialized equipment. They maintain heating systems in bus stops so remote that maybe 5 people use them daily. Most countries would close these routes during winter to save money and reduce risk. Switzerland spends whatever it takes to keep them open, because closing them would mean abandoning citizens, breaking promises, violating fundamental values. Switzerland spends between 12 and 15% of its entire government budget on transportation, infrastructure, and operations. Most of this money goes to trains and buses serving people, not highways for private cars. This represents one of the highest transportation investments of any country on Earth. Swiss people pay high taxes to support this system, and they willingly pay because they believe transportation should be available to everyone regardless of income, age, or where they choose to live. The wealthy banker in Zurich and the elderly farmer in a remote valley both deserve the same quality of transportation service. The results of this philosophy appear across Switzerland's landscape in ways that transform how communities function and how people live. Mountain villages that should be losing population, that would be dying in other countries, actually stay stable or even grow because reliable transportation lets people keep their traditional mountain homes while working in valley cities. Young families can raise children in villages where their ancestors lived for centuries because school buses and trains provide daily connections to modern opportunities. Grandparents can age in familiar places rather than being forced to move to cities for medical care and services. Swiss farmers living in remote valleys take morning trains to city markets, where they sell their fresh cheese made from milk of grass-fed cows, mountain honey gathered from alpine flowers, organic vegetables grown in rich mountain soil. City workers take evening trains to countryside homes where they enjoy clean air and mountain views, where their children can play in forests and meadows. Elderly people in isolated communities take weekly buses to valley towns for medical appointments and grocery shopping, maintaining independence decades longer than they could without reliable transportation. Connection keeps communities alive that would otherwise slowly die. Switzerland's trains run on 99% renewable energy generated from mountain water power. Alpine rivers flowing from glaciers and waterfalls generate electricity that moves millions of people daily while creating almost no pollution. Hydroelectric plants built into mountainsides capture energy from falling water. Swiss transportation proves that protecting the environment and serving people can work together, that modern mobility doesn't require destroying nature, that engineering can find solutions where others see impossible trade-offs. This philosophical difference creates completely different results than most countries achieve. In nations that treat transportation like a business expected to earn profits, remote communities slowly lose population as transportation services get reduced or cancelled to save money. Young people move to cities because rural areas become too isolated to maintain careers or education. Mountain villages become ghost towns, occupied only by elderly residents waiting to die. Their children and grandchildren gone forever to cities. Traditional ways of life disappear not because people choose to abandon them, but because lack of connection makes them impossible to sustain. In Switzerland, remote communities stay alive and connected. Families choose to live in mountain villages because reliable transportation means they are never truly isolated, never cut off from opportunities and services. Traditional ways of life survive because people can maintain them while still participating in modern society. Switzerland proves that engineering and investment can overcome geography, that political will can preserve traditional communities, that modernity and tradition can coexist if you build the infrastructure to support both. Switzerland's transportation system costs truly enormous amounts of money. Taxpayers support bus routes that serve only handfuls of people. Cable cars that barely break even financially get maintained like essential infrastructure. Mountain railways that operate at significant losses receive government funding year after year without complaint. Critics could easily argue this money would be better spent on other priorities. But Swiss people accept these costs because they believe mobility creates freedom that justifies the price. Freedom to live where you choose without being imprisoned by geography. Freedom to work where opportunities exist without abandoning your home. Freedom to visit family and maintain community connections. Freedom to age in familiar places without becoming prisoners of isolation. The test of this philosophy comes when the system faces extreme pressure, when someone pushes Switzerland's transportation to its absolute limits. The challenge of reaching all 26 cantons in 24 hours will reveal whether Switzerland has truly engineered a country that cannot be broken, where mobility is not just a political promise, but a practical reality that works under any conditions, even conditions designed to break it. High in the Swiss Alps, where glacier ice glows blue in sunlight and mountain peaks disappear into white clouds that drift across summits like ghosts, where the air is so thin and pure that breathing feels like drinking cold water. Something impossible happens every 30 minutes with Swiss precision. A bright red train climbs vertical mountain walls, carrying passengers to the highest railway station in all of Europe, rising from green valleys into a world of ice and stone. This is not a cable car being pulled by steel cables, not a helicopter ride using brute mechanical force. This is a regular train with wheels on rails that somehow defies gravity itself to reach places that should be completely unreachable except to expert mountain climbers. Travel to Grindelwald, in the heart of Switzerland's Bernese Oberland region, and see where this mountain adventure begins. Wooden chalets with flower boxes overflowing with red geraniums fill a green valley surrounded by towering peaks that seem impossibly tall. The famous Eiger Mountain rises like a stone giant above the village, its north face, the Nordwand, one of the most dangerous climbing walls in the world, a vertical wall of rock and ice that has killed dozens of climbers who attempted to conquer it. British tourists first came here 150 years ago, looking for clean mountain air and the adventure of Alpine climbing, starting a tradition of mountain tourism that transformed Switzerland. But wealthy Victorian tourists wanted to reach higher places without the danger and difficulty of actual mountain climbing. They wanted views from the summits without the risk of falling to their deaths. So Swiss engineers decided to build something that had never been successfully attempted at this scale. Railways that could carry trains up impossible mountain slopes to the very tops of the Alps, to places where eagles soar and glaciers glow, where the world spreads below like a map. Board the bright red cogwheel train at Grindelwald station and feel the excitement building as passengers from around the world prepare for an engineering adventure into the sky. The train looks relatively normal from the outside. Bright red paint, large windows, comfortable seats. But underneath it possesses special gear teeth that can grab onto notches precisely cut into the rails between the regular tracks. Without these gear teeth engaging the notched rail, the train would simply slide backwards down the steep mountain slopes, pulled by gravity into disaster. The train starts climbing immediately after leaving the station, the grade so steep you feel it in your body. Look out the enormous windows and watch green pastures with grazing cows slowly drop below and behind. Wooden farmhouses become tiny dots in the valley. Church spires that seem tall become toys. The train climbs so steeply that passengers lean forward in their seats, that objects roll if not secured, that children press faces against windows and gasp at the growing height. You can feel your ears pop as the train gains elevation faster than an airplane ascending after takeoff. The landscape transforms minute by minute as the train climbs higher. Alpine flowers replace farm crops, gentians blooming electric blue, edelweiss showing white star shapes. Snow patches appear even in summer, remnants of winter that never fully melts at high elevations. Dark pine forests give way to smaller, tougher trees, then to low shrubs, then to bare rock and ice. The transformation from Swiss countryside to high mountain wilderness happens in just 30 minutes of climbing. Every mountain destination receives the same level of infrastructure investment and maintenance as major cities. Replacement parts must be carried by helicopter to stations above the clouds. Maintenance workers repair tracks while wearing oxygen masks and safety harnesses to prevent falls. Snowplows keep platforms clear during alpine storms that would stop all activity in other countries. Switzerland maintains full service to every remote location, no matter how challenging or expensive, because the philosophy demands it. Connection is a right, and spectacular geography is Switzerland's greatest treasure, that all citizens should be able to experience. Switzerland engineered a country that shouldn't work by refusing to accept that mountains, different languages, and cultural differences must create permanent division. The Gotthard Tunnel did not erase the mountains. Mountains still tower as high and imposing as ever. The tunnel went through them with determination and engineering excellence. The Taktfahrplan did not force everyone to become the same. Linguistic and cultural differences remain strong. Instead, it coordinated their differences into harmony. Universal transportation did not eliminate economic inequality. Rich and poor still exist. It made inequality irrelevant to mobility and connection. Somewhere in Switzerland right now, at this exact moment, a train enters a tunnel, carrying people from German regions to French cities to Italian valleys. They are not thinking about the decades of investment that made this journey possible, not considering the philosophy that created the infrastructure, not contemplating the political choices and sacrifices that built this system. They are simply going to work, or visiting family, or traveling to see beautiful places. The infrastructure is invisible precisely because it works perfectly, seamlessly, constantly. Switzerland proves beyond doubt that difference does not require division, that diverse people can coexist peacefully through shared infrastructure and mutual commitment to connection, that long-term thinking creates extraordinary results that short-term thinking can never achieve, that engineering can overcome geography when combined with political will and sustained investment. The question for every country watching Switzerland is whether they are willing to make that choice, to pay that price, to commit to that vision. This documentary told a story about trains in Switzerland, but it was really about how you build a nation from impossible pieces, about how you choose what matters most, about how you engineer systems to serve those choices, about how you keep those systems working across generations through sustained commitment, about how connection can overcome division when you believe it matters enough to invest everything in making it real. Switzerland engineered a country that shouldn't work into a country that works like clockwork, not by accident, not by luck, not by having easy geography or homogeneous culture, but through deliberate choice made 150 years ago, sustained investment across generations, and a philosophy that connection, mobility, and equality are worth paying for no matter the cost. You discovered through this journey that perfection is possible when you commit to values beyond immediate profit. You learned that shared infrastructure and shared belief hold diverse nations together far better than shared culture or ethnicity. You experienced what Switzerland created through generations of effort, a country where everything works, where connection is assumed, where infrastructure serves everyone equally, where beauty and engineering combine into something approaching magic. If this documentary changed how you think about what becomes possible when you engineer for connection rather than division, when you invest for generations rather than quarters, when you choose equity over profit, please like and subscribe. Share this with people who believe that differences must divide, that mountains must separate, that perfection is impossible. What surprised you most about Switzerland? The Taktfahrplan's precision? The mountain tunnels piercing impossible peaks? The commitment to remote villages? The philosophy that made it all possible? What would you change in your own country if you had the power? The conversation about building better countries starts with understanding what is actually possible when vision meets commitment. Switzerland showed the world